Welcome to my channel World Scene News. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. The G7 summit in Alberta, Canada should be a showcase of global cooperation, a moment for world leaders to unite against common challenges. The majestic Rockies provide a stunning backdrop, and the mood among dignitaries is hopeful as they arrive, ready to discuss pressing issues from climate change to economic recovery. Instead, the summit takes an unexpected turn. President Donald Trump arrives with a bold agenda, immediately stirring controversy. He pushes for Russia's return to the group, a move that catches many off guard and sparks heated debate. The atmosphere in the meeting rooms grows tense as Trump clashes with other leaders, challenging the spirit of unity the summit was meant to foster. Tensions escalate further when Trump openly criticizes Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, questioning his leadership and motives. He also targets American governors who have long valued strong cross-border ties, accusing them of putting Canadian interests ahead of America's. The public confrontations are unprecedented, leaving both Canadian and American officials visibly rattled. In a dramatic and highly publicized move, Trump storms out of the summit early, refusing to participate in further discussions. Prime Minister Carney is left to address the media alone, fielding difficult questions and attempting to reassure both nations. The empty American chair at the conference table becomes a powerful symbol of the growing rift. But the real shock comes moments later, when Trump faces reporters and declares, "We don't need Canada." The words reverberate instantly, sending a chill through the summit and beyond. It's a statement that signals not just a diplomatic disagreement, but a potential unraveling of a historic partnership. This isn't just a diplomatic gaffe, it's a seismic shift in a relationship built on over a century of trust, shared values, and mutual interests. For decades, the US and Canada have stood side by side, weathering global storms together. Now, that foundation is suddenly in question. The statement sends shockwaves through both countries. The world's longest undefended border, once a symbol of peace and cooperation, now feels uncertain, and millions of people whose livelihoods depend on cross-border trade, travel, and family ties are left wondering what the future holds. The Alberta Summit, intended as a forum for unity, instead becomes the spark for a full-blown family feud. News outlets around the globe broadcast the unfolding drama, and crowds gather outside the venue, reacting in disbelief and concern as the story breaks. The stage is set for a dramatic clash, not just between two neighboring nations but within America itself. Governors, federal officials, and ordinary citizens are suddenly at odds, debating the future of their most important international relationship. What happens next will test the very foundation of North American partnership, as leaders and citizens alike grapple with the consequences of a neighborly dispute that has turned unexpectedly and dangerously nasty. After the summit, Trump doubles down, imposing a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. The move is pitched as protecting American jobs, but it's really a wall of taxes, not bricks. The reality? US and Canadian industries are deeply intertwined. Tariffs hit both sides, raising costs for American manufacturers. Supply chains that cross the border multiple times are thrown into chaos. The rhetoric grows harsher, with some in Trump's circle calling Canada the 51st state, a dismissive insult that stings. Businesses face uncertainty, and the billion-a-day trade relationship is suddenly at risk. What was once a model partnership is now a battleground, with respect and equality on the line. The trade war is personal, and the damage is just beginning. While Washington builds barriers and the rhetoric of division grows louder, a different story is unfolding along the US-Canada border. State and provincial leaders, recognizing the deep economic and cultural ties that bind their regions, unite in a rare show of cross-border solidarity. In Boston, governors from the northeastern US and premiers from Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada gather for what was once a routine annual meeting, now transformed by crisis into a pivotal moment. This annual meeting becomes a rebellion. Democrats and Republicans alike join Canadian leaders to oppose the tariffs, setting aside partisanship for the sake of their constituents. Governor Hochul of New York calls the tariffs a tax on Americans, reframing the issue as a direct hit to US families and small businesses already struggling to make ends meet. These leaders hear firsthand from businesses and workers already suffering from the trade war. Factories laying off employees, family-run shops closing their doors, and communities fearing for their future. In response, they form a coalition, vowing to protect their regional economies and preserve the cross-border ties that have fueled prosperity for generations. With federal relations frozen and national leaders at an impasse, Canadian premiers see these governors as their new lifeline to the U.S., forging partnerships that bypass traditional channels. The Boston Summit marks the birth of a powerful subnational alliance, determined to keep the U.S.-Canada partnership alive, even as official diplomacy falters. This isn't just politics, it's a fight for jobs, stability and decades of friendship. For many, it's about protecting the livelihoods of families on both sides of the border. The governors and premiers become the true guardians of North American cooperation, stepping up where national governments have faltered, and showing that unity can still triumph over division. Their unity offers a glimmer of hope amid growing division, reminding both nations that the bonds of friendship and shared purpose can endure even the toughest political storms. The tariffs' impact is immediate and painful. Factories in New York, Michigan, and Maine lay off workers as supply chains break down. Ironically, some U.S. companies move operations to Ontario to avoid tariffs, costing American jobs. Energy bills rise in the Northeast, where states like Vermont rely on Canadian power. Tourism collapses. Canadian visitors to Maine drop 26%. Vermont hotels see a 45% plunge. Small businesses suffer and local economies reel. Michigan Governor Whitmer calls the policy madness, as auto supply chains unravel and costs soar. The governor's warnings are no longer theoretical, they're desperate pleas to stop the bleeding. The trade war isn't about winning, it's about real people losing livelihoods. The human cost is mounting, and Washington seems deaf to the pain. The disruption spreads beyond autos and energy. Massachusetts' life sciences sector faces shortages and delays as tariffs hit medical equipment supplies. Americans realize how deeply their lives depend on seamless trade with Canada. Critical minerals, vital for tech and defense, are suddenly harder to source, even as China cuts exports. Ontario's resources could help, but U.S. policy pushes Canada away. The chaos sparks a brain drain, as Canadian companies lure top U.S. talent north with promises of stability. The tariffs don't just block goods, they reverse the flow of innovation. In Canada, Trump's hostility triggers a political and economic reckoning. The shockwaves from Washington force Canadian leaders to confront a hard truth. Their southern neighbor is no longer a predictable partner. Suddenly, the old assumptions about cross-border cooperation and shared prosperity are upended, leaving policymakers scrambling for new strategies. The country's reliance on U.S. trade, 75% of exports, suddenly looks dangerous. For decades, Canada's economy has been tightly woven into the fabric of American markets, with millions of jobs and entire industries dependent on the free flow of goods and services across the border. Now, that interdependence feels like a vulnerability, not a strength. Mark Carney wins the 2025 election on a promise to stand up to the U.S. and diversify Canada's economy. His campaign taps into a growing sense of urgency, as Canadians demand leaders who can protect their interests and chart a more independent path. Carney's victory signals a new era of assertiveness in Ottawa. Canada pivots to Asia, seeking new markets in India and even China, despite past tensions. The government launches ambitious trade missions, forging deals with emerging economies and investing in infrastructure to connect Canadian resources to global buyers. This outreach marks a dramatic shift in Canada's foreign policy priorities. The old rule of moving in lockstep with America is broken. For the first time in modern history, Canada is willing to challenge U.S. positions on trade, climate, and foreign affairs, even if it means risking friction with its largest trading partner. For the first time in generations, Canada is charting its own course, less dependent on U.S. goodwill. Canadian businesses are encouraged to innovate, explore new partnerships, and adapt to a world where the U.S. is just one of many options. This isn't just a reaction to Trump, it's a fundamental shift in Canada's global strategy. The country is reimagining its place in the world, building relationships that reflect its own values and interests, rather than simply following America's lead. The change could permanently alter North America's economic landscape. New trade routes, investment flows, and alliances are being formed, reshaping the region's future in ways that will be felt for decades. The era of automatic partnership is over. Canada is building new alliances. From Europe to Asia, Canadian diplomats are forging ties that reflect a more multipolar world, where influence and opportunity are spread across continents. The consequences for both countries will be profound and lasting. As Canada steps onto the world stage with renewed confidence, the relationship with the US enters uncharted territory, one defined by independence, adaptation, and the pursuit of new possibilities. The fallout isn't just political or economic, it's deeply personal. Decades of trust and friendship between Americans and Canadians are shaken. Polls show 60% of Canadians no longer trust the US. Many feel betrayed by a friend. Americans too are divided. 60% oppose the tariffs, including a quarter of Republicans. The easy cross-border camaraderie is replaced by suspicion and disappointment. Tourism drops, investment stalls, and the once casual friendship is strained. The damage to trust is the hardest to repair. Rebuilding the bond will take more than policy changes. It will require genuine healing. The human cost of this feud may outlast any trade war. The trade war's biggest winner isn't the US or Canada, it's China. By making North American manufacturing more expensive, the US drives companies to seek cheaper suppliers overseas. Tariffs meant to punish Canada end up strengthening China's foothold in the market. Critical minerals, essential for defense and green tech, are harder to source from Canada, increasing US reliance on China. Governor Whitmer warns, "When we say no to Canada, we say yes to China." State leaders work to compete with China, but federal policy undermines their efforts. The US weakens its own position, handing a strategic advantage to its main rival. The consequences could last for generations. As 2025 ends, the US-Canada relationship is battered but not broken. The economic wounds are deep, but the loss of trust is deeper. Removing tariffs is just the first step. Healing will take time and real change. American leaders must treat Canada as an equal, not a junior partner. The alliance of governors and premiers shows that cooperation is possible. The future depends on remembering what unites both nations: shared values, prosperity, and friendship. Mending fences will be hard, but it's a journey both countries must take together.